Hi, everybody. My name is Ivan Hannell, and I've been away from the UFO space for a bit. Let me tell you what happened. I had a lot of work to do, and then recently I was in a trial all last week, 4-day jury trial. Interesting case, crazy facts, people in conflict, as usual. And then the week before, as most lawyers will know, you're constantly trying to figure things out and make sense of, and your attention is there. But one of the things that was fantastic was I was able to sort of divert my attention for moments of time to this great and new controversy about Lou Elizondo. And I just thought it was fabulous fun. It was very entertaining. And it reminded me of, all the typical hysteria and lunacy of the UFO people. So first of all, I actually owe you a moment of thanks. It was, like I said, a terrific opportunity to get my head out of the case and into some other insanity. And so in that respect, both, writ large, whether writ small, the chaos continues. All right. So thanks for that. So the reason for this video is, I've always wanted to have this opportunity to share a few thoughts, but it was never the right time. It would just come out of nowhere. But actually, this unique moment allows sort of a synthesis of several thoughts I've had. And so I wanted to share them with you, hopefully for your benefit. But let me go ahead and start out with one thing, which is that, to start off, this is my opinion only and not Lou Elizondo's. In part because we probably would disagree on many of the things that I'm about to say. So there's that. It's part because I was always an independent person before I met Lou because, for example, I started a group online that it was a Signal group. I'm not on Signal anymore. I think it's kind of silly, but it was called Convergent Interest. I don't know whether the group exists or whether it's changed name or who's in it, but whatever it was intended to be a place for people to talk and have all sorts of different people. Okay, so, and that was before I met Lou, and then I met Lou, and on and on. Okay. And then, lastly, this gives me an opportunity to say something important about my role as an attorney versus what people always have assumed for some insane reason, which is that I was looking to be a UFO attorney or be a part of this thing in this way. It was not, okay? So let me explain. As an attorney, a real practicing attorney, I'm general counsel of a company. I do private civil litigation on the side. So, I do a variety of things. I'm a business owner. I have a couple of businesses and got a lot of stuff going on. But the way it works from my perspective as an attorney, which is why I don't like to be called Lou's attorney, and therefore I'm not, and I've asked him, to not do that, essentially, for a very particular reason, which is sort of me. It's not about him. It's about me, which is this, that as an attorney, there's only a couple of different times where I'm actually representing somebody as their lawyer, right? One is, if there's a dispute before it gets to trial or before it gets filed in court, I'll represent somebody there. Then if it's in court, I have to file what's called a notice of appearance to the court, because then there's a new set of obligations to the court itself. And so that's when I'm somebody's attorney. Another case where I'm somebody's attorney is if I'm representing them in a transaction. So like as general counsel of a company, I go in and I'll do something on behalf of the corporation or make a statement of, or whatever, or sign something even. So there's some situations where I'm actually somebody's attorney, but I'm not like a criminal guy who's on retainer with the mob, and just gets paid whether they do anything that month or not. That's not how I operate. It's not the kind of law I practice. Don't know the first thing about criminal really. And more to the point, it's not true. And so you do have to then question all the people in UFO world who've always been like, I need to be known as Lou's lawyer. I'm Lou Elizondo's lawyer. Or whoever's lawyer. It doesn't matter. They're seeking something for themselves beyond or as a result of that relationship, whatever it is. And that's just not my MO. I don't need more clients. I don't need more cases. In fact, I need to, take a long break, but we'll see. I like it too much. It's kind of addictive in that way. All right. So, so basically what I'm trying to say through all this is, this is my opinion only. I'm not acting as Lou's agent here. All my points of view are entirely my own and probably very different than Lou's. And that's the way it is. I don't lose my voice just because I once represented somebody or still represent them, and I love Lou and I'd always help him in any legal or other issue, but there's nothing going on. It's just nothing going on. Sorry. That would apply my skill set. All right. Now let's move on to the next point. So there was a recent conversation between somebody named Gerb and Ross Coulthard. And I met Ross, fine, no concerns. I didn't get to watch the whole of the podcast. I was in trial; it was just too long, and I did watch about a half an hour, but then I apologize, my attention was waning for whatever reason, because I couldn't get over at the beginning something that was said at around minute 7 or 8. It was like, oh no, the rest of this I can't. It was hard to go further than that because of how ridiculous it was. And what happened was Ross set up a question that allowed Gerb to say something like, Lou's very litigious, but I'm going to take a risk anyway and say truth to power. Well, buddy, you're not taking any risks. What you're doing, anybody can do that. You're not the hero of your own story by just saying, but what you've done is you've alleged and you've just, sort of tarnished somebody by saying that they're litigious, and there's no evidence of that. And you have 1,000 acronyms, go find all the 1,000 cases where Lou's involved. You simply won't have them. They don't exist, right? And they just don't. For a public figure, Lou has had two things. He doesn't have, he's had almost no litigation or legal issues to speak of by comparison, especially in such a contentious and weird area. So that's one thing. But also by nature and by temperament, he's a very agreeable person. The person you see on television is, strangely enough, also the person, no matter how much time you spend with him, that you see, on TV. He's just that guy. He's just nice, agreeable, wants to get along, doesn't want to name names, doesn't want to hurt anybody. Is that to the benefit or, the problem with disclosure? That people got, I don't know. But he is who he is, and he's a genuinely nice human being. And that's why, to whatever extent he should have much more litigation going on, he simply does not, because he makes the choice to say, no, let's, turn the other cheek. Let's look to the positive and not the negative, bring people together. It is a good quality if you want to try to help people. On the other hand, I'm very different than Lou in that way, and I do exactly what I'm about to do, which is, tell people exactly what I think, because I think there is a value in the just absolute truth to people, whether they like to hear it or not. I do them a disservice if I don't tell you what I actually think of a situation or of you as a person. So here we're going to go. So Gerb, don't worry about it. You're safe. There's no legal letters coming your way. That's not his MO. There's nothing about that at all. It's just invented, and you need to stop inventing things on that respect, because eventually it does. It's like affects your credibility. So prove it. If there's a million cases out there with Lou, show me the litany of them. Now, I would just caution that, in any life, right, there's going to be some litigation nowadays. If you're 30 years old, 35, and hopefully you don't get in anything before then, but let's say you're 50 like I am, 55 actually, unfortunately in America nowadays, people are going to get involved in disputes. I'm just saying generally, right? Everybody is probably going to have something. You're going to have a divorce. You're going to have a probate issue, a family issue. You're going to have a traffic accident or ticket. You're going to have an employment dispute. You're going to have a problem with the AC contractor. You're just going to have problems. It's kind of in the nature of the way we are, because we're so competitive and we don't like to give up, and we think there's resolution in the courts, and we watch all these TV shows with lawyers, and that's where everybody goes, right? It's just always, always, always. So, to say somebody is litigious implies they should have at least, 10 cases or 20, or they're, a vexatious litigant. They're always in front of the courts, or they're always suing somebody, and if you're State Farm Insurance, I get it. That's kind of your job. But, the average person is not going to have that. And the same is true for Lou. He's just not a litigious person. And you don't have the proof of it, which brings me to Ross, who asked the question which allowed you to give this answer, which you did in order to kind of suggest that you're being the hero of your own story and fighting against ominous forces who use legal or other means to suppress your dissident voices. Okay, this is where I take issue with you, Ross, and you have my telephone number. I know you have Lou's, but regardless, let me get to the point. There's a certain duty, and this is why people have criticized like a Joe Rogan or others, that they ask questions that allows people to give very unqualified answers, and which then become the gospel of the day, right? And so in so doing, they actually create the hostility of, so you can ask questions that allow somebody else to say somebody else is a Nazi in response, and then they're left, well, no, I'm not a Nazi, or no, I'm not, a child abuser, no, I'm not whatever. And that's what you did. right? That's what you did. You asked the question that allowed Gerb to respond in such a way as to make himself the hero of a cabal, which fits your whole narrative about this intrepid journalist. Now let's talk more about you as a lawyer, because you constantly refer to yourself as a lawyer. In every other video, you're like, I've had legal training. Buddy, you've had legal training back in 1982. It was in New Zealand. To my knowledge, you've never represented a single client. I mean, to say that your legal training should give you any insight into the events of today is almost like saying, you should have comment about the automotive industry today because you used to shoe horses, back in the 30s. There's no basis for you to use that. And so I wonder why you always say that. And what I realize and what I believe is that you say it because you have an insecurity about otherwise just being a journalist. You need to say something like, well, based on my legal training, it teaches me. No, you don't have any right. And a good lawyer, a person who's ever practiced law, a person who knows law at all, would never ask the type of question that would allow somebody to say something, even if it's not defamatory, that is just patently untrue, unless they had proof of it. And neither of you have the proof. So what you do is you do this in order to conjure up a controversy and an allegation so you can feel self-important and so that you, Ross, can feel more than just a UFO journalist. And that's an inner demon you've got to work out, buddy. I'm telling you, you got a problem. But out of respect for all lawyers, please stop saying you even have legal training. You just, it'd be like me saying I'm because of my political science training at Yale, I'm a political scientist. Political scientist is a whole profession, takes graduate school, it takes a lot of work. You have to work, like it's the whole thing, statistic, it's insane. But I don't ever call myself a political scientist. You need to stop saying you're anything related to law. I mean, you don't have even the background of a 2-year paralegal or even a 1-year paralegal who's done hard work. You just don't have it. Stop talking like a lawyer. You're not. And what you're doing by soliciting these kinds of ridiculous questions is impugning the integrity of somebody who's not litigious at all by any stretch of the imagination, unless everybody who's watching this, I guarantee you, you're going to have a problem with a doctor, with a contractor, with your wife or ex-wife, with your kid, over kids, over property, over your brothers. It's going to happen. And this is the nature of life. And so Lou is not a vexatious litigant. He's not even litigious. He's just nothing. He's just a guy, a nice person. And to the extent that, I've ever said, hey, you should do something, he refuses to because he likes to treat people well as much as he can. All right. Having said, having kind of given my little tongue lashings on you both, I'm going to move on to something more important in a way, which is this, that when you guys do this, you're always looking to create this idea that you're victims of some grand conspiracy involving the government and a program. Your grand conspiracy because there's secret forces against you and yada yada, Sith Lord almost, or a Voldemort, somebody behind the scenes, shadowy, and you keep on doing this. And you guys always are like you're victims of something, that you're set upon, you're beset by again, and this allows you to be the hero of your own fictional journeys. Well, let me tell you something. Let me talk about real people in real danger, and then compare yourselves to them. Okay. Are you, let's say, an American soldier in the Middle East right now? If you're not, shut up. You don't have anything to worry about. Are you a soldier, more importantly, and even more dangerous, is being a soldier on the front lines in Ukraine, fighting for their country and for their lives, generally speaking, 30, 40, 50-year-old men, they're not young, with families, lives in the fullest part of their lives, being chased by drones, right? How terrifying that must be. You see the Russians walk off knowing they're about to be killed, and they just turn their back and walk off as a drone hits them in the back, right? What despair, what lack of hope. And ultimately, to some degree, I have to admit, they're also brave, all of them, even the terrible Russians, for taking that incredible risk with their lives. They're brave. I think they're wrong on the Russians, but they're at least brave, okay? Let's take a look at another brave category of people. How about journalists? But not you, Ross. How about the journalists in Mexico and throughout Latin America who get killed by cartel regularly, whose lifespans are actually low because of this insanity? They have something really to fear. And there's some tremendous ones out there who I admire a great deal. And yet they're the ones who they're brave people, and you're not. You're not a brave, this is just not bravery. And let me tell you another category of people who are brave. How about most women who are 95% of the people who've experienced domestic violence, right? There are women who go and continue in their families and in their relationships for children or for fear or for whatever, and who are always battling, right? Who are battling the next day and the next day and the next day to keep the family, to keep their lives, to keep their kids safe. They're brave. You're nothing. None of you are anything like those people, and I've just listed 4 categories. You're not brave. You created fictional assaults upon yourself so you can be heroes and draw attention. You're actually cowards, and I just detest you for it, honestly. There it is. I just wanted to say it. All right. So stop with the stupidity. Now, another thing that I like to say, only 2 more points, is one, that, this whole campaign is being orchestrated by one person. And that person believes they should be the UFO czar. And guess what? This is just a figment of their crazy and neurodivergent mind. There is no such position, to my knowledge, being created or has been constructed. It doesn't even exist. So you're fighting for a job that doesn't exist and worried about the competition. I mean, and then you've orchestrated an insane campaign to try to blemish somebody who you think might be your adversary or your competition. Why don't you compete fair? Instead, you got to go in little word campaigns behind the scenes, making you no better than this monolithic UAP program that you complain about. It's just utter toxicity and stupidity. You're a weak person. I have no confidence you could ever accomplish anything like commanding anything, because if you have to resort to means like this, of like this weird stuff, it means you can't do anything. All right. No such position exists. There's no threat to you. In fact, the real question isn't whether there's a UFO czar. How about there just be like a czar to figure out why we left refueling planes and other targets incredibly vulnerable in the Middle East when we were about to attack them, such that billions of dollars of equipment and lives have been destroyed. While we had a 7 years heads up by watching Ukraine with drones, and yet here we are, here you are, you UFO people are worried about like lights in the nighttime sky when American soldiers are being killed by conventional drones, and and we've had that 7-year run up and nothing was done. I mean, if somebody wants to be a czar of that, please go to it, right? Figure out why we've had utter stupidity in the military. That's why it's hard to comprehend, and when I see these people in uniforms and the colonels and whatever, I'm just like, go fuck yourselves. You've left them vulnerable. You didn't do the right thing. Now we're in chaos. We don't even have the tools appropriate to the mission. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians, who we left behind, and didn't help, have gone farther than us. It's a pathetic situation. And your UFO stupidity, God, it's just disgusting. Last point. All of you are so contentious and insane because you believe this thing called UFOs is going to help us, right? Like somehow the technology is going to make us amazing, right? And I hear so much stupidity about that. Or you think the ontology, the knowledge, the awareness of UFOs is going to create some sort of spiritual, situation where everybody floats up to heaven or something. I don't know what you're thinking about. But let me start with the technology. I've heard all manner of stupidity about it. I mean, for example, I'll give you one story that I keep hearing that somebody repeats over and over, which is idiotic, which is this idea that they're going to use this technology to port a nuclear weapon and send it to Russia quickly to destroy, to have a first strike capacity. First of all, if you have something that can send a nuclear weapon all the way in a second to Russia, you don't need nuclear weapons, right? I mean, why would you destroy an entire city or a land, or hundreds of cities and bases when you could just send a beer bottle to knock the bad guy over the head and put him to sleep? I mean, if I had that technology today, it'd be zapping a beer bottle on Putin's head and he wouldn't wake up and we'd be done with it, So the whole premise of this technology, and then it's going to help decarbonize things. I mean, we already have batteries and solar panels. We're on our way there. Technology hasn't really benefited us in the way that we thought it would, at least in terms of human nature. I'm 55, Gen X. I've seen it. I've seen all the change that's really relevant in the last, 40 years. And I'm telling you, it doesn't seem like people are getting any better. And I don't know if the technology is revealed or allowed them to express their underlying insanity, or alternatively, itself has somehow generated it. Whatever the case may be, it's not solving it, and that's a big issue. So stop looking at the technology. It's no panacea. As to the ontology, the same is true. All you really have is the ontology right now, and look at you all. You're insane with each other. You're toxic, disgusting, plotting. you know, you've given up your professional values. Ross, that's you. You know, you're just the worst. And you think that this knowledge of UFOs is going to lift us up and make better people? No. Making yourself better is like building up a sandcastle every day. You got to keep reconstructing yourself through tasks, through trials, through tribulations to be a better person. That's what it is. And that's what we really need. Unfortunately, nobody's talking about that, about the inner work most people need to do. Instead, they're talking about aliens because you think through some external source, you're going to become better inside you. It's not going to happen and you're going to fail. Having said all that, I hope this was an educating video, edifies you a little bit about my perspective as Lou's non-lawyer person who has some opinions. But as a lawyer, I also hope it gives you some insight into why I don't like to be called Lou's lawyer or anybody's lawyer except for those whom I'm actually representing. Why I don't think Lou is a litigious, and that fear is being used to manifest a hero's journey for certain people like Gerb or others. Why Ross Coulthart should stop calling himself a person with legal training because you display the exact opposite of it. And it just shows an insecurity. And Megan, you're his producer. Tell him to stop. It's really weird. And it also shows no insight, and it allows people to traffic in stupidity. You know, I'm not going to call it slander, but it's just stupidity. Okay. And then finally, you know, to the one person who's organized this campaign, you're petty, you're vain. I don't care if you're neurodivergent. It's no excuse. It's disgusting. You know, it's just so wrong. And to your congressman who you work for, you should know better. You claim to be a Christian, but you allow people to be very unchristian in their practices, and it's gross. And I hope your Christian people in Missouri, who your constituents, know who you really are by your actions, not just your words. And then lastly, again, you know, all of you stop. You're not heroes. You're not risking anything. There's no black helicopters and laser beams and whatever you think is going on. It doesn't exist. You're just people, Americans mostly, unfortunately, typing away at keyboards and very vexed with your own lives. If you want to be a better person, don't wait for the UFOs. You can do it on your own.